Did you know your normal daily diet might be quietly setting you up for leg weakness and falls? The danger doesn't start in the hospital. It starts on your plate, with what's missing, not what you eat. There is a quiet assumption many people carry into their 60s and 70s, and it sounds reasonable on the surface. If you eat meat a few times a week, if you meet the recommended daily allowance, if your plates look normal, then protein must be covered. On paper, that logic makes sense. In real human biology, especially aging biology, it falls apart. What I've observed repeatedly is that leg weakness often begins not with a dramatic loss of muscle, but with a long period where muscles are simply undernourished for the job they're being asked to do. After 60, the body no longer responds to protein the way it once did. Muscles develop something called anabolic resistance, which means the signal from protein to rebuild muscle becomes faint and inefficient. Imagine knocking on a door that used to open immediately, but now only opens if the knock is loud and clear. The muscle-building machinery is still there, but it requires a stronger signal to turn on. When that signal never fully arrives, muscle protein synthesis stays muted, and over time sarcopenia quietly takes hold, particularly in the legs where the demand is constant. This is where confusion sets in. People stay active. They walk. They move. They assume movement alone will preserve strength, but movement without adequate building material becomes maintenance without repair. Protein is not an optional nutrient for aging muscle. It is the raw material that determines whether tissue is rebuilt or slowly dismantled. Without enough of it, the body enters a subtle survival mode, recycling muscle tissue to meet basic needs, even while you're still using those muscles every day. A helpful way to understand this is to think of muscle like a building under constant stress. Protein is the brick shipment. You can have skilled workers and a clear repair plan, but if the bricks don't arrive consistently, nothing gets rebuilt. Cracks spread, flaws weaken. Eventually, the structure becomes unreliable. This is exactly what happens in the legs when protein intake is chronically too low for aging physiology, even if it looks adequate by outdated standards. I remember a man named Frank, 73 years old, who walked faithfully every morning. On the surface, he was doing everything right, but stairs told a different story. His legs shook. Rising from a chair took effort. When we looked closely at his meals, there was protein present, but never enough at one time to cross the threshold his muscles now required. His legs weren't failing from lack of effort. They were failing from lack of signal. What becomes clear at this stage of life is that protein timing and distribution matter as much as total intake. Aging muscle doesn't respond well to small, scattered amounts. It needs a meaningful dose to activate repair pathways. When that dose never arrives day after day, the legs slowly lose their reserve. Strength fades first, power disappears next, balance suffers last, which is why people are often surprised when instability shows up seemingly out of nowhere. This gradual drain is dangerous precisely because it feels subtle. There's no pain, no obvious illness, just a quiet sense that the legs aren't what they used to be. Over time, this shifts how people move through the world. Steps become cautious, movements become smaller. And without realizing it, muscle loss accelerates because underused muscle deteriorates even faster. Protein deficiency in older adults is rarely dramatic, but its effects are relentless. When muscles are not given enough reason and resources to rebuild, they adapt downward. Leg power fades not because the body is broken, but because it has been underfueled for years. This is the slow drain that so many mistake for aging itself, when in reality, it is biology responding exactly as it was designed to respond to scarcity. For many people, vitamin D sits in a strange category of importance. It's acknowledged but rarely respected. It's talked about in the context of bones, sunlight, or childhood health, and then quietly dismissed as a minor detail later in life. Yet in aging physiology, vitamin D plays a far more decisive role than most realize. When leg power begins to fade, the issue is not always muscle size or effort. Sometimes the problem is communication itself. Movement is not just a muscular event. Every step is a conversation between the brain and the legs. Signals travel down nerves. Coordinate muscle fibers adjust force and maintain balance in real time. Vitamin D is deeply involved in this process. It supports muscle fiber function, neuromuscular coordination, and the timing that keeps movement smooth and confident. When levels are low, that conversation becomes delayed, distorted, or incomplete. The effect is subtle at first. Walking speed slows slightly. Steps feel less automatic. Balance requires more attention than it used to. These changes are often blamed on joints or aging reflexes, but the underlying issue is frequently a weakened signal. Research consistently links low vitamin D levels with poorer lower extremity performance, slower gait, and increased fall risk, particularly in older adults who already sit near the threshold of deficiency. A simple way to picture this is to imagine the signal between the brain and the legs as a phone call. Vitamin D is the signal strength. When it's strong, communication is clear and immediate. When it's weak, messages drop, lag, or arrive too late. The muscles may still be capable, but the timing is off. Power without timing feels like weakness, even when muscle tissue is still present. This is why some people remain physically active yet feel increasingly unsteady. They are moving their legs, but the neurological control behind that movement is compromised. The brain hesitates. The muscles respond a fraction of a second too late. Over time, the body compensates by slowing down, widening stance, and reducing stride length. These adaptations feel protective, but they often accelerate decline by reducing natural strength and responsiveness. I recall a woman named Elaine, 76 years old, who described feeling off rather than weak. She exercised regularly and had no major joint pain, yet her confidence while walking had eroded. Blood work eventually revealed low vitamin D levels. Her muscles weren't failing structurally. They were operating with incomplete instructions. Once that gap was recognized, the picture made sense in hindsight. Vitamin D deficiency is especially common because it hides well. Sun exposure decreases with age. Skin becomes less efficient at synthesizing vitamin D. Diet alone rarely provides enough to compensate. And because symptoms are vague, the deficiency often goes unnoticed until balance or gait becomes a concern. By then, the nervous system has already adapted to operating below optimal signal strength. What's striking is how often this deficiency overlaps with fear of falling. When the brain cannot trust the timing and reliability of the legs, it shifts into caution mode. Movements become guarded. Reaction time slows. Confidence erodes. The legs may still have strength, but without clear neurological guidance, that strength is poorly expressed. Vitamin D's role in leg power is not dramatic, but it is foundational. It doesn't build muscle directly, yet it determines how well existing muscle is used. When levels are insufficient, the body moves as if it's driving through fog, even in familiar terrain. Over time, that fog reshapes behavior, posture, and independence. What looks like aging from the outside is often a signaling problem on the inside, quietly influencing every step. Vitamin B12 is rarely discussed in conversations about strength and almost never mentioned when someone complains about their legs feeling unreliable. It's usually associated with anemia, fatigue, or memory, and even then, only when levels are severely low. But in aging adults, the most consequential effects of B12 deficiency often show up somewhere else entirely, in the way a person walks, balances, and coordinates their legs in space. Every movement depends on electrical signals traveling efficiently through the nervous system. Those signals tell muscles when to contract, how forcefully to fire, and when to relax. Vitamin B12 is essential for maintaining the protective insulation around nerves that allows those signals to travel cleanly and quickly. When B12 levels fall, even modestly, that insulation begins to degrade. The result is not sudden paralysis or dramatic weakness, but something far more insidious: delayed signals, misfires, and inconsistent muscle activation. This is why B12-related leg problems are often misunderstood. Muscles may test as strong, joints may appear intact. Yet walking feels awkward, balance feels unreliable, steps don't land quite where they're expected to. The body compensates by slowing down, stiffening movement, and increasing visual attention to the ground. Over time, this compensation becomes exhausting, both physically and mentally. A useful way to picture this is to think of nerves as electrical wires. Vitamin B12 is the insulation around them. When the insulation is intact, electricity flows smoothly. When it thins or breaks down, the signal sparks, fades, or arrives late. The muscles are ready, but the message they receive is incomplete. Strength exists, but it's poorly expressed, which makes the legs feel weak, even when they're not. I once worked with a man named Harold, 79 years old, who described himself as clumsy. He wasn't frail, he wasn't inactive, but his feet didn't always land where he expected, and his legs felt unreliable on uneven ground. Testing revealed that his muscle mass was reasonable for his age, but his vitamin B12 levels were low enough to impair nerve conduction. His problem was not strength, it was communication. What makes this particularly relevant in older adults is how common B12 absorption problems become with age. Stomach acid declines, certain medications interfere with absorption, diets shift away from animal-based foods, sometimes unintentionally. And because early symptoms are vague, the deficiency often progresses quietly. By the time gait changes become noticeable, the nervous system has already been struggling to keep up. There is also a strong connection between low B12 levels and increased risk of sarcopenia. When nerve signals fail to consistently activate muscle fibers, those fibers are gradually lost. Muscles that are not fully recruited begin to shrink, especially in the legs where coordination and timing are critical for daily movement. This creates a feedback loop. Weaker signaling leads to weaker muscle, which further degrades stability. What's striking is how often this decline is mislabeled as just getting older. The shuffling gait, the widened stance, the hesitation before stepping off a curb. These are not simply signs of aging bones or joints. They are often signs of a nervous system struggling to deliver clear instructions to muscles that are still capable of responding. Vitamin B12 sits at the intersection of strength and control. Without it, even well-nourished muscles lose their edge. Movement becomes less precise, balance becomes more fragile, and confidence erodes, not because the body is incapable, but because the signals guiding it are compromised. This is the twist most people never hear. Leg power is not only built in muscle tissue, it is preserved in the nerves that tell those muscles how and when to act. As the years pass, the body becomes very honest. It stops compensating as easily. It stops masking small deficits. What once went unnoticed begins to show up in how you move, how steady you feel, and how confident you are on your feet. This is not the body failing. This is the body communicating. And one of the most important ideas emphasized by Mark Hyman is that symptoms are signals, not random punishments. They are messages asking to be interpreted, not ignored. Leg weakness is one of the clearest signals the body sends as we age. It doesn't mean something is irreversibly broken. More often it means the system has been running without full support. Muscles that aren't adequately rebuilt, nerves that aren't optimally nourished, signals that aren't as sharp or reliable as they once were. What looks like decline from the outside is frequently unfinished maintenance on the inside. When protein is insufficient, muscle becomes expendable. When vitamin D is low, communication between brain and leg loses clarity. When vitamin B12 is lacking, nerve signals lose precision. Each deficiency alone can quietly erode leg power. Together, they create a perfect storm that reshapes movement, posture, and confidence. None of this happens overnight. It unfolds slowly, which is why so many people accept it as normal aging rather than a correctable biological pattern. The emotional weight of this matters. Strong legs are not about athletic performance. They are about safety in your own home, confidence on stairs, the ability to move through the world without constant calculation or fear. When leg power is preserved, independence feels natural. When it fades, life subtly shrinks. Recognizing the biological roots of that process changes the story from inevitability to opportunity. Aging, in this context, is not a downhill slide. It is a phase where precision matters more than ever. The margin for error narrows, but the body remains remarkably responsive when it receives the right inputs. Strength returns not through force, but through alignment with how aging physiology actually works. The most important takeaway is this: the body is not betraying you. It is responding logically to what it has been given. When muscles are fueled consistently, when signals are clear, and when nerves are properly supported, the legs regain their reliability. Confidence follows. Movement becomes less cautious and more natural again. Leg power at its core is not about pushing harder. It is about supplying what has quietly gone missing. Fuel muscle like a daily prescription, identify what has been absent, and give the body a clear reason to rebuild. Independence is not something you lose all at once. It is something you protect, one biological decision at a time.